Temilade Ajayi pressed her palms together so tightly her knuckles went pale, the way she used to do as a child when thunder rattled the zinc roof in Ibadan. The cabin was calm but tense, filled with that quiet hum before a plane leaves the ground. This was her first flight. By a stroke of unexpected luck, the airline had overbooked economy and upgraded her to first class, seat 2A, on the very trip her parents had spent months saving for. She could still hear her mother's voice from that morning, praying over her, and her father's firm but gentle, "Remember, Temi, keep your head high. You belong anywhere God puts you." In her bag sat a folder holding her CV, certificates, and the printed email for a job interview she'd been chasing for months. In seat 2B sat a man whose presence drew attention without asking for it. His face carried the kind of sharp focus one might see in a Lagos businessman, strong lines, eyes that seemed to notice more than they let on. He wore a muted gray polo, a black watch that hinted at taste and means, and a frown that suggested he wasn't looking for conversation. When the engines roared to life and the aircraft began to roll forward, Temi's hand instinctively gripped the armrest between them, knuckles tightening with every vibration. The stranger turned his head slightly, noticing her tension. His expression softened just enough to show he'd understood. "First time?" he asked quietly. She nodded, releasing a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. "Yes. It's a lot." "You'll get used to it," he replied, his voice steady, almost reassuring. Temi smiled faintly. "You sound like someone who flies often." "I do," he said after a brief pause. "Let's just say I move around for work." "You're a tech bro?" she teased, remembering the stereotype from social media. The question caught him off guard. A corner of his mouth lifted into the smallest of smiles. "Something like that. I'm Tobi." "Temilade," she said, "but everyone calls me Temi." As the plane rose into the clouds, she shared her story, how she had applied for this job countless times, how her parents had worked extra hours to make sure she could come to Lagos for the interview, and how she was determined to make it count. Tobi listened without rushing her. He told her only that Lagos would be a fresh start for him, leaving out the truth that he was Ayatomiwa Adeyemi, the only son of a billionaire family, heading to quietly take up the role of managing director at his father's Lagos branch. For now he preferred to be just Tobi. They talked about travel, work, and the small joys that kept people going, her mother's pepper soup, his morning runs. Somewhere over the skies between Abuja and Lagos, the frown he had worn when she first sat down was gone. "You'll do great," he said as the plane began its descent. "Amen," she replied, her heart fluttering with a mix of nerves and excitement. At the arrivals hall, they walked together until the crowd separated them. Temi waved, but a surge of passengers blocked her view. By the time she looked again, Tobi had disappeared into the Lagos bustle. She stepped outside into the warm air, clutching her folder and telling herself the same thing her mother had said at dawn. "Omo me courage. God is here too." Victoria Island glittered under the afternoon sun, its glass buildings catching the light like they were competing with the sky. Temi walked with her handwritten bucket list tucked inside her bag, a short list of experiences she wanted to have while in Lagos. Some were simple: visit the Nike Art Gallery, walk the Lekki Ikoyi Bridge at dusk. Others felt like small luxuries, like trying bubble tea at a cafe she'd seen in an online video. Inside the cafe, ceiling fans turned lazily above, the air filled with a sweet, unfamiliar aroma. Temi ordered a taro milk tea with extra tapioca pearls and scanned the room for a seat. Then her gaze landed on a familiar face, gray polo, black watch, calm but watchful eyes. She froze for half a second before breaking into a surprised smile. "You." Tobi looked up from his drink, recognition sparking across his face. "Temi. C2A." She laughed and made her way to his table. "I guess Lagos isn't as big as they say. Or maybe it's just on our side today," he replied, gesturing for her to sit. They spoke easily, picking up where the plane ride had left off. She mentioned her bucket list and he asked her to read it out. Instead of teasing her, he listened intently, nodding at each item as if it were perfectly reasonable. "I've never tried bubble tea before," he admitted, eyeing her cup. "Here," she said, sliding it across. "But no judging." He took a cautious sip, then chuckled. "This is complicated, but good. Like Lagos." Their conversation meandered from favorite foods to places they had both yet to explore in the city. Tobi's reserved demeanor softened with every shared story. He asked for her phone number before they left, and it didn't feel rushed. It felt natural, as if it was always meant to happen. From then on, their days began to weave together. Late-night calls stretched until one of them started yawning mid-sentence. They met for casual outings, ticking off more of her bucket list. Wandering through the Lekki Arts and Crafts Market, trying roasted plantain by the roadside, walking across the Lekki Ikoyi Bridge as the sun dipped into the lagoon. One afternoon, when rain forced them to shelter in a quiet cafe, he offered to help her prepare for her upcoming interview. He asked her practice questions and encouraged her answers, praising her confidence. "You've got this," he said as if it were fact. Temi, staying with her friend Bizi in Aja, found herself looking forward to his visits. He never came empty-handed. Sometimes it was a small snack, sometimes just stories about his day. His presence was steady, unhurried, and free from the pressure she had expected in a city like Lagos. For reasons she couldn't fully name, she trusted him. The call came on a quiet afternoon. Temi was watering her friend Bizi's potted plant when her phone rang with an unfamiliar number. "Hello," she answered, heart already beating faster. "Good afternoon, Miss Ajayi," the voice on the other end said. "We're pleased to inform you that you've been selected for the position." For a moment, Temi forgot how to speak. Thank you. Thank you so much." She hung up and immediately called her parents. Her mother's joyful tears filled the line, and her father's voice carried that proud tone she'd always hoped to hear. "Temilade me, you have done well," he said. Her next call was to Tobi. He let her finish the news before saying, "Tonight we celebrate." They met at a small, softly lit restaurant in Onairu. Over plates of smoky jollof rice and grilled fish, they shared laughter and talked about the road ahead. Near the end of the meal, Tobi cleared his throat. "Temi, I've enjoyed every moment we've shared since the day on that plane. I'd like us to be more than friends." She blinked, a little surprised by his directness. "Are you asking me to?" "Yes," he said with a small smile. "To be my girlfriend." Her smile spread slowly. "I think I'd like that." From that night they grew even closer. Temi started her new role at the company the following Monday. The headquarters was a tall glass building in Victoria Island, with a sleek lobby and security so tight that certain floors were off-limits to most staff. The highest floor, she learned, was reserved for the executives and their assistants. As a new hire, she worked on a lower floor and had no reason to go up there. Tobi, meanwhile, remained a steady part of her life outside work. He never asked detailed questions about her office and she never asked too much about his. Their conversations were filled with lighter things: plans for the weekend, new food spots to try, or how the Lagos rain seemed to have its own timetable. Weeks passed and she found her footing in her role. Then one Friday morning her manager asked for volunteers to assist with a high-level meeting for the company's leadership team. Temi offered without hesitation, seeing it as a chance to observe how decisions were made at the top. The meeting was set for the executive boardroom on the top floor. Her task was simple: assist in setting up refreshments. She didn't think much of it as she rode the elevator up, balancing a tray of coffee cups and snacks. What she didn't know was that this meeting would open a door she had never planned to step through. The executive floor was unlike any other part of the building Temi had seen: quiet, polished, and filled with the subtle hum of important conversations happening behind closed doors. She pushed the trolley forward, carefully arranging coffee cups, tea, and biscuits for the meeting. When she entered the boardroom, her eyes swept over the long polished table, taking in the sharp suits, poised expressions, and confident conversations. Then her gaze froze. At the head of the table sat Tobi. Not in his usual casual style, but in a tailored suit that seemed to carry authority on its shoulders. There was no mistaking it, he wasn't a visiting guest. He was the focus. In front of him was a nameplate: Ayatamiwa Adeyemi, Managing Director, Lagos Branch. Her breath caught. The coffee jug in her hand wobbled, slipping just enough to spill some of its contents onto the tray. The sound drew a few glances, but it was Tobi's eyes that locked on hers instantly. For a brief moment, it felt as if the rest of the room disappeared. His expression softened, but hers was frozen in disbelief. Temi quickly murmured an apology, set the tray down, and excused herself. Her heart pounded as she left the boardroom. The realization hit harder with every step: he had never told her. From the day they met on the plane, through every bucket list adventure, every late-night conversation, he had kept this from her. Was it a game? A test? Had he sat beside her on that flight pretending to relate to her struggles just to feel something different? For the rest of the day she avoided the executive floor entirely. She ignored the messages that came to her phone. "Temi, please, let's talk." She turned her screen over and focused on her tasks, though her thoughts were loud enough to drown out the clicking of keyboards around her. When the workday ended, she slipped out without waiting for him. That night she didn't answer his calls. Over the next week, she kept her distance, ignoring him at work, not responding to texts, and even avoiding the places they often met. But despite her silence, he didn't stop trying. For Tobi, the silence was unlike anything he'd felt before. He went through meetings distracted, his usually sharp decisions slower to form. The city around him was alive as always, but it no longer felt bright. Both of them knew something had broken. What neither of them knew yet was whether it could be repaired. Sunday afternoon folded Lagos into a softer version of itself. Temi left the Abuja apartment needing air that didn't taste like confusion. She took the BRT toward Victoria Island with no real plan beyond sitting somewhere familiar and quiet. The boba shop had become that kind of place, bright, predictable, and far enough from her office to breathe. Outside, a small convoy idled at a respectful distance. It was impossible to miss. Dark SUVs, drivers standing with the poised stillness of people trained to notice everything. Temi hesitated at the door, steadying herself. If Tobi was inside as Ayatamiwa Adeyemi, then she would be inside as Temilade Ajayi. Equal in dignity if not in power. He was there, already seated at their usual table. No entourage, no assistants. Just Tobi in a simple shirt, hands around an untouched drink. When he saw her, relief crossed his face so quickly it looked like gratitude made visible. "Thank you for coming," he said, standing and then sitting again when she did. For a long heartbeat, the room was all ceiling fan hum and clink of ice. Temi took in the details that used to calm her. The chalkboard menu, the bowls of bright straws, the window that framed a slice of sky. She found her voice. "You could have told me," she said. "Any of those nights on the phone. Any of those walks." "I should have," he replied. "I told myself I was protecting something honest. The first hour I knew you, the hour on the plane, was the first time in a long time I wasn't being measured by my surname. I wanted to keep that hour alive. And then the hours kept multiplying, and so did my fear that the truth would break them." "It wasn't the truth that broke them," she said. "It was the delay." He winced, accepting the line like a verdict he respected. "You're right." He didn't reach for her hand. He didn't lean in. He simply made space and spoke clearly, like someone laying out records on a table. "I lied about my role. Not about who I am with you. I meant the bridge walks. I meant the suya and the plantain chips. I meant every call where I learned your day before I spoke about mine." Temi looked down at her cup. A bead of condensation slid toward her fingers. "Do you know what it felt like in that room?" she asked. "To see you at the head of the table like a different person? I felt small. Foolish. Like I'd been watching a play without knowing it was staged." He nodded slowly. "I can't take that feeling back. I can only choose what I do from here." He paused, choosing words with care. "I've started changing a few things at work. We redirected a facilities contract to include smaller vendors. One of them is a cooperative in Ibadan I vetted myself. We launched a scholarship for public school graduates in communications and tech. None of this fixes what I hid. I'm telling you because the man you met at the suya stand is the same person I want to be when no one is watching." Temi let that sit. She thought of her father's hands measuring wood by eye, her mother's needle finding its way by feel, the quiet dignity of doing the right thing when no applause waits. The ache in her chest loosened but didn't leave. "I need time," she said. "To see this without the noise. To decide whether the fear that made you hide will keep showing up when we need truth." "I'll give you time," he answered. "No flowers at your office. No messages through colleagues. I'll be where I've always said I am. If all you ever want from me is a sincere apology, you have it. If you want more, I'll be grateful for the chance to earn it properly." They sat a while longer, not filling the silence just because it was there. When she finally stood, he didn't follow her to the door. Outside, the convoy stirred, then settled again as he stayed seated inside, alone with his cooling drink. The days that followed were purposeful by necessity. Temi returned to work, keeping her focus on tasks she could finish and stories she could tell well. On the staff portal, a notice about the new scholarship appeared. In procurement, people murmured about revised vendor lists and fairer terms. She told herself these were corporate decisions. She told herself they might also be the shape of a promise. She took a weekend trip to Ibadan and told her parents everything at the dining table that had seen every season of their lives. Her mother listened with the patience of someone mending a hem, unhurried, precise. Her father said, "Temi, dignity sits well on you. Keep it on." Then after a quiet moment he added, "Good men make mistakes. So do good women. The kind we keep are the ones who learn." Back in Lagos, Temi wrote "forgive where possible" at the bottom of her bucket list. It didn't feel like surrender, It felt like strength with boundaries. On a rain-polished Thursday, she drafted a message, erased it, drafted another, and finally sent the simplest version. 6 Same table. Friday 6 p.m.? The reply came almost at once, short and careful, as if he were trying not to set the air on fire. I'll be there. No entourage. Thank you. Ask ChatGPT. The sky over Victoria Island wore the gold of early evening when Temi stepped into the cafe. She half expected her nerves to run ahead of her, but they stayed with her, steadying her steps. Tobi was already at their usual table. No suit today, no symbols of power, just a man in a navy shirt, looking up the moment she entered. Relief passed over his features, quiet but certain. She sat across from him, setting her bag down carefully. I wanted to see you, she began, without the office, without the noise. Just us. He nodded, leaning forward slightly. That's all I've wanted from the start. They talked, not in circles, not as if rewinding old arguments, but in a way that unfolded the last few weeks into something they could both hold. Tobi told her about the loneliness that had driven him from Abuja, the way his family name had built walls instead of bridges, and how meeting her on the plane had been the first time in years someone saw him before his position. Temi listened, her expression calm but intent. I like the man I met in Seek 2B, she said, and I needed to know if he's the same man in the boardroom. I am, he answered simply. The truth is, I want to be better than both versions you've seen. And if you'll let me, I'd like to try with you beside me. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she spoke of her parents' sacrifices, the values they had sown into her life, honesty, resilience, humility. I can forgive the way you started, she said finally, but I need us to be partners in truth from here on. He nodded. You'll always have my real name, Temi? From there, they began to rebuild, not with grand gestures, but with the same simple moments that had bound them before. They walked the Lekki-Ikoyi Bridge again, matching steps. They shared roasted corn by the roadside. He visited her parents in Ibadan without a convoy, helping her father fix a crooked window and listening to her mother's stories over steaming bowls of umla. A year later, under the clear Maitama sky, they married in a ceremony that brought two different worlds into one courtyard. Her parents wore aso oak woven in Ibadan. His father beamed beside his mother as guests from Abuja, Lagos, and beyond filled the space with music and laughter. At the reception, they slipped away for a moment to the quiet edge of the garden. Temi took his hand just as she had clung to the armrest on that first flight. You know, she said with a small smile, this still feels like we're in the air. Tobi smiled back. If it is, I'm glad you're in the seat beside me. They returned to their guests hand in hand, the kind of steady that doesn't need proving. Proof that sometimes the most lasting journeys begin at 30,000 feet.